Hey everyone, Dan here. Gonna do something a little different tonight. It's gonna be hopefully a series of videos. We'll see how it goes. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about the art of writing. And I call myself the professional raconteur. And you may wonder about that. I throw that up there at the beginning of the video. Professional raconteur. And if you're not familiar with the word raconteur, I know a lot of you are, but in case you're not, it basically means storyteller. And I'm a professional storyteller. Now, that's different than saying I'm a professional author or a professional novelist or a professional comic book writer or a professional script writer or any of those things. For one thing, I've done all those things. I've written probably close to 10 novels, 100 comics, a few TV pilots. I've had a few things on the air. I've got a lot of stuff out there. And I don't ever want to be pigeonholed into, oh, he writes this or he writes that, because I'm a storyteller. Whatever medium you want it in, whatever genre you want, I can do that. And the reason I can do that, is the approach I take. And this is going to come down to probably the second question you have to answer when you decide you want to be a writer. The first question, obviously, is, do you want to be a writer? You can't just go, it just doesn't hit you one day that you are a writer. It's not like someone's going to come by and strap you to a chair and put a keyboard in front of you. They might strap you to a chair, but I doubt it's so you can write a manuscript. So that's the first question is, do you want to be a writer? And at this time, when we're all stuck at home or stuck away from people we care about, we're supposed to stay in place, this might be the time you need to actually write. And writing is a process. It's logical as much as creative. And those are some of the things I'm going to be talking about over the next few chapters or whatever this thing ends up being. But tonight we're going to focus on the second question and then the third. The second question to me, and this is a very important question, is what type of writer do you want to be? In my mind, there's two types of writers. Now, I'm not talking about how you write. I saw a video recently that said that there are plotters and there's pantsers, and I hated the term pantsers, but people who sit down and lay everything out in outlines, and people who just, make it up as they go along, and there's all different kinds of way people create. What I'm talking about is the emphasis of your writing. What is your main goal? There are literary writers, people that they go to school and they study it and they learn all the grammar and all the turns of phrases and all, they've got these huge vocabularies, and not saying that other types of writers don't, but that's kind of their thing. And they choose every word on the page specifically as if they're painting a picture. Every word on the page has to be exactly what they want. That is a literary writer to me. That is someone whose novel is supposed to transcend the work. It's more than just the words on the page. It's art. Every page is art. That's a lot of pressure. You get some beautiful novels over the years, but you tend to get one from those type of authors. Sometimes two, mostly one. They're brilliant, they're amazing, they get made into these big sweeping dramas. And that's it. Then there's guys like Stephen King, Jim Butcher. You could probably go through a list of a lot of prolific authors. And what they are, they're storytellers. Their goal isn't to make the most amazingly beautiful novel ever. Their goal is to tell you a story, to entertain you for however length of time it takes for them to tell you the story. Whether it's a comic book and entertaining you for 22 pages, whether it's a movie and they've got you for 90 minutes, 110 minutes, or it's a novel and they've got you for 25 chapters, 300 pages, whatever it is. That's a storyteller. And storytellers tend to be very prolific. They tend to write faster because there's less worry about what it is they're doing. But storytellers have something else going for them. And this is an anecdote from recent. A friend of mine went back to school and is studying, and she was writing a research paper. And the notes she had gotten in class previously was that her papers lacked transitional phrases and transitional sentences. And she didn't get that. She didn't understand what the problem was. This is a research paper. You're telling this stuff. Well, and I had to explain to her that whoever's reading the paper, you need to tell them the story. Even if the story is how these things are put together, how X facts and Y facts are put together to make up your thesis, you're still telling them a story. Otherwise, they're reading the manual for IKEA furniture. So you need to tell them a story. And once she got that, she wrote a brilliant paper. It was great. Because she realized that she was telling a story. And that's the key. And that's the type of writer I am. That's how I can jump from doing 1950s noir horror to a love story, erotic love story, to comedy, to sci-fi, and everything in between. I mean, that's the key, is being able just to sit down and tell the story, because that's your big thing, is you're telling your story. The second thing that I think you need to decide is whether you're, besides being a storyteller or a literary author, is your approach is going to be what drives your story. Is it characters or situations? Now, I never knew that this was a question. I always assumed that you write for characters. And the reason is because maybe I grew up doing acting. You know, in junior high, I played Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. And I all through high school and into college, I acted. I mean, even now, I sit down with the Skeleton Crew and do these table reads when of movies that never got made. And because I love it. I love acting. I would love to do more acting. So for me, characters are the key to telling a story, because they're the vehicle. They're what's getting people's attention. But I was sitting at a convention in San Jose doing a panel with a writer that I held in high regard, a comic book writer that I had read often as a kid and growing up. And I mean, he was older than me, but at that point I was kind of a peer. And as we talked to the audience, somebody asked about this question, and I said that I write from characters. So I get to know the character as well as I can, and then I put them in a situation, and they kind of run through the scenario. And if it changes, if what they would naturally do shifts the scenario, I go with that over trying to be stuck in the situation, because to me that's more natural. If the characters are doing what they should do or how they would act naturally, then you're telling a good story. He was the other way. He felt that situations, whether the plot drove everything. And then I got to talk to him afterwards, and he said that basically he plotted out his story, and that was what he did. And I've always been the type that my stories flow a bit. I never plot out an entire story. I plot it out in thirds, like 3 acts. And I let it swerve through that first act, and then I realize I know where my end point is. I know my beginning and end, and I plot out the first act, and then as I'm writing it, if it swerves, I then try to take it back to where I want it in the second act. But I take it back from wherever it leaves off at the end of the first act. So if I'm going a straight line in the plot, or in the outline, But now, when I'm writing it, it starts going over here. Well, then I just start over here in Act 2 and then try to work back towards whatever the natural flow back towards it. And if I don't get there, well, then I do the same thing in Act 3. I just start working back towards my ending. And that's worked out pretty well for me. And I think it works. I think it's a good approach. I can't say for sure because I'm not every writer. But let me take a second. By the way, I drink tea, not coffee, because I'm not a heathen. Okay. So, your approach, first question is, what type of writer do you want to be? The second approach, what is your driving force? So when you sit down, you want to tell a story. Those are the decisions you got to make. Now, I made the decision that I was a storyteller and character driven, and that's worked very well for me. That has allowed me to do stuff like the Lucius Fogg books. This is going to be the best example. I wrote the first Lucius Fogg book, Deadly Creatures. I think I got it, here. Deadly Creatures. I wrote it live on Twitter. And the reason I wrote it live on Twitter is everything I had written up to that point had been comics, and I tried to do some screenplays. But anytime I sat down to write prose, I found myself rushing. I would just fly to the end of the story. So what I did was I sat down and I said, I'm going to write a chapter a day, every other day on Twitter. I'm going to do it live. I'm not going to pre-write it. I'm not even going to pre-plot it. I know the basic story I want to tell. I know my characters. I'm going to let it go the way it's going to go. And I figured I would do maybe 10, 15 chapters, and I'd have a nice short story. I didn't expect it to go where it did. As I started writing, I got maybe 5 chapters in, and I realized it wasn't working, but I was writing live. So what wasn't working for me was that the main character was telling the story. It was a first-person narrative, but the things weren't happening to him. He was a witness to everything. And that wasn't working. I needed more drama for him. I needed more stakes for him. So what I did was I killed off my initial important character that I planned to use through the entire thing, and just he was gone. And suddenly everything started happening to my hero. What that did was that upped the stakes. That made everything personal. That put him in the crosshairs. And in doing so, I got more attached, because right in first person, you start becoming that character. So this stuff was starting to happen to me as I was writing, because I was writing as Jimmy Doyle. Yeah, I know they're called Lucius Fogg Mysteries, but Jimmy works for Lucius. So Jimmy tells the story. So I become Jimmy when I sit down to write these, because they're in first person narrative. So suddenly I'm dealing with all the stuff. So it became very personal for me. Well, that got me more into the story, and I was telling it. And then as it progressed, I felt it just kept getting bigger and bigger naturally. More things were finding its way into the story. Things that made sense. Jimmy started doing things that I hadn't planned him to do, but they were the things his character would do. And this expanded the story. So I think in the end, it ended up being 45 chapters. Now, the first 10 were actually a short story I had written previously, where I first introduced the characters, and that had been done a few years before. So I took those and I merged them in with what I wrote on Twitter, and that became Deadly Creatures. But the point being is that I let the story drive it. I let the feel drive it. It didn't work without Jimmy, without things happening to Jimmy directly. So I made that change. At one point in it, I was at San Diego Comic-Con. I wanted to write before I went to the con that day. So when I got up, I had this strange idea that I was going to add the Russian mob. It was a scene I had in my head, and that's what came to mind that morning when I sat down. So suddenly I introduced the Russian mob. They weren't planned. It was somewhere in the late 20s, early 30 chapters. So it was well into the book. But that became a huge part of the ending, which, again, is something I let the story tell naturally. If I had sat down, wrote the full plot, and stuck to it, boom, I would not have had all those things. It would never have become a novel. It would have been that short story that I originally planned. I let my imagination, I let my characters breathe, I let my imagination run, and that's how the book came out. So it's important that you just make those decisions and you sit down and write. If you know everything you want to do and you want to plot it out meticulously and you want to paint every word on the page, that's great. That is your approach. That's what you're going to do. I do it differently. There is no right or wrong way. You have to find what works for you. But that's why those questions are very important. So once you decide you want to write something, you need to decide what type of writer you are and what your driving force is. Once you've got that, then everything else works. But these are the questions that are more than just, what am I going to write on this book? This is, what type of writer am I going to be, period. Because once you make those decisions, you start creating your process. You start, well, I'm going to do this kind of outline. I break it down this way. This is how I make my characters. This is how I get to know my characters. I've got tricks for coming up with small characters or minor characters and major characters. I've got tricks for all these things, and they all came about once I decided the type of writer I was going to be and what was important. I don't know if I would even need some of those tricks if I was a situation-driven writer. If the plot was key, not the characters, it would be very different. So that's going to be the first thing you need to answer yourself. If you've decided, I'm finally home, I've got the spare time, I can't work, I'm not working, it's time to write my magnum opus. I love that term, magnum opus. If I ever had a kid, he might have been named that, which really would have sucked. But anyway, so once you've decided it's time to write, you need to decide how you're going to write, and then the rest of the process comes along. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about the rest of that process. I'm going to talk about where the story ideas come from. I'm going to talk about how to sit down and plot out the book, how to approach your first chapter, all those kind of things. I'm going to do as many of these as I can, and you email me, message me, send comments, whatever you want. If there's something you need explained more, if there is something you want touched upon, talk to me. I am happy to cover any of those things. At this time, I've got the spare time, and I've always wanted to do something like this. I've done writing classes before. I did a fun writing class in Phoenix, the PhoenixCon one year. We did it for the Hero Initiative, and raised some money for them. We made about $500 or $600 for the Hero Initiative, and these people came and they listened to my. I want to say we did 3 hours, hour and a half and a break, and another hour and a half, or something like that, or maybe it was 2 hours with a 15-minute break or something. But it was a long class, so I'm going to try to bring some of that to this. So please hit the like button wherever that is, and subscribe so you know when the next video comes up. I'll be posting these on social media and whatnot, but this is going to be a new thing, at least for a little while we're all stuck at home. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Now, today, as I'm recording this, is March 22nd. Between now and midnight, March 24th, Deadly Creatures, the ebook of this, is available for free on Amazon. So I dropped the price. I figure people are at home, they need distraction. The least I can do, let them grab the book. So the book is free on Kindle or ebook or however you read, but you can get it on Amazon for free, and it'll be that way until the 24th. And it's only until the 24th because they give you a start and an end date on a promotion like that. So I stretched it out as long as I could. I started it Friday. It's going to be good until midnight on Tuesday. So if you want the book, grab it. If you want a print copy, you can get that through Amazon. I have an audio version of it. I haven't uploaded yet, but it's done by Cody Parcell, who I'm working with on Books for Dynamite Books now. He's a great narrator, so I'm going to work to get that up soon too. I've got a lot of things on my plate right now, but I'm going to try to get that up, so we'll have a audio version of the first Lucius Fogg book soon too. But Deadly Creatures, if you're interested in that. I've got a bunch of other books out now. I got a brand new SEAL Team 6 book. SEAL Team 6 No More. There we go. SEAL Team 6 No More. A New Flame. It's volume 13. You don't have to read all the other ones to catch up, or you can. They're great. So that's available now, also on Amazon. And Cody read that one. So it's on Audible. It's on Amazon in print and digital. And again, that's Dynamite Books, which is the new line that I'm editing and writing for. So feel free to jump in on those. There's also the new Nancy Collins Vampirella book, and Scott Wilson's SEAL Team 6 AX, which is Auxiliary Executives, which is based off a character I created in my book. So Scott's running with that character. All right, so that's going to wrap it up tonight. Again, please hit the like, subscribe buttons, please. I could use it. And I hope you're all taking care of yourself. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for listening. Again, message, comment if you have any questions about writing or anything else. I'm here for you guys, okay? We'll get through this together. Take care.